Well, it's time for the review of what's making the headlines in the papers, as Dr. Constance Ikoku is still here with us. Sometimes change happens.
Yes, I am still here. Good morning, Benga. Again, how are you? How are you doing today?
I'm good, and good to be back from the weekend frenzy.
Yes.
And starting a new week with a new vision, and just to dissect what's happening on the headlines.
I hope you had a good weekend anyway.
A restful one indeed, actually.
All right. Hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with This Day newspaper. So we'll go right there. In This Day, the top economic story this morning, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, NUPRC, releases 4-year scorecard. Nigeria's rig count jumps 762% to 69. Says 400 dormant oil fields identified, 358.6 billion naira remitted to host communities. Nigeria's rig rose from 8 in 2021 to 69 as at October 2nd. It's been reported that rigs are a key indicator for assessing the health and future potential of the industry. All these affect investor confidence, and quite a bit of movement in the upstream sector. Out of the 69 rigs, 40 are active, and remember the president had issued an NPCL a marching order to increase oil production. Indications are that we are getting there, or the goals are being achieved. There is a plan, and we're heading there.
Yeah, I think what we are seeing in the petroleum sector, coming from the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, is having a clear blueprint, and that's in place of the Petroleum Industry Act that has been able to create more transparency, boost investors' appetite, and also promote efficiency within the oil sector. When you look at the fact that the oil rig is jumping from 762%, that's a clear upward movement that shows a long-term economic and energy growth for the country. We say kudos to the boss of the NUPRC for steering such a regulation in a sector that has been marred by corruption and all kind of underhanded practices. It shows that now we can see investors, because he also talked about $40 billion that the sector has already attracted. $40 billion, that's a lot. But now when we hear all these very mouth-watering figures, we should be able to see how that transparency will get to create a turning point in the nation's economic life, getting the food on the table.
Definitely, because if there are more oil rigs being exploited, it means that we're producing more oil. It also means that we're earning more income.
Absolutely.
And so how does that translate into the country's purse? You know, if we have more revenue, how are we managing those resources, and how is that affecting the lives of Nigerians? I think that is where Nigerians will be looking at. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the second story in This Day as well. There, uncertainty as U.S. delays on AGUA renewal, U.S. expresses worry. We know the AGUA has been an economic blueprint, economic program for African countries. For African countries over the years. It's been on for quite a while now. So it's been wrapped up. The point then, or the question people are asking, is there going to be an extension? We haven't heard that there will be an extension, and that is going to affect a lot of African countries and businesses, especially small and medium term enterprises that were involved in this opportunity.
Yeah, while I laud the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, but I think it's time for Africa to look beyond U.S. now for its in its rate for economic future, because running a shutdown economy, a shutdown government for the 5th day now on a row shows that the U.S. is also battling with its own internal uncertainties. So it's time for Nigeria, it's time for Africans. When you look at the trade balance, within Africa, the volume of intra-African trade is still very low, 13%, and there is a lot. and research has shown that when Africans trade together, the cost is minimized. We have all these resources. So I think Africans should learn to see how we can boost that intra-African trade. And that's the essence of the AfCFTA, the Africa Free Trade Zone Agreement, to promote this trade, to maximize the opportunities and the potentials for the economic future of the continent.
Yeah, but yes, there is the AfCFTA, which is very important. It is for the future of Africa. Eventually, if we're able to pull that off, it's already working, but there's still a lot of ways to go. In spite of that, you still have to trade with the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
You know, so yes, the U.S. has is struggling at the moment with political decisions. However, there are also other parts of the world where Africans can begin to engage as well. That is already happening, but more should be done. You know, I guess that's what you're saying essentially. Let's move to the third story in this day, which says strike. Dangote refinery Lord Tinubu, Ribadu, Ajayi, others over roles in settling a dispute. Eventually, that strike has been called off. And Dangote is very grateful to this man. The National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, we did know that some of the meetings held in his office. Why? Because it was viewed as a national security problem. If the oil rigs are shut down, if the strike goes on for extended periods of time, it does affect the economy, you know. And so Dangote is very grateful that they were able to intervene in this. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical, but I'm happy that at least the strike is off, because the NNPC Group Managing Director reeled out the losses, 30% petroleum losses, marketing gas also experienced 16%, and also the power slumped by 20%. That's a very huge loss, running into several billions of naira for the nation at this time where we are troubleshooting and drawing every profit into the revenue basket. It's a huge setback for. But the NSA always coming as that final joker to mediate on trade disputes is what worries me, because it looks like
how is that a source of worry?
It looks like guys, you've got to accept this deal, or we wield the big stick. That's the kind of a signal it sends. Because I feel that the Minister of Labour, statutorily, by his functional responsibility, should be able to mediate in this agreement. But we see a situation where there is a repeated deadlock. And when you see the NSA coming, you wonder if the priority issues have really been addressed, or it's just a convenient solution, a temporary convenient solution that compels the union to back down, to drop their gauntlets and follow through what has been offered them.
Right.
It's not essentially clear if the issues have been clarified. That's the issue. But we see Dangote also, a lot of investment that's gone down that project, $20 billion for the start. And he's also trying to expand and to address all the energy bottlenecks in the economy. So I think it's a good development, but we should be careful to ensure that all the underlying interest is being addressed.
Well, you are correct that it is the primary responsibility of the Minister of Labour and Productivity, and of course the Minister of State, to negotiate and interface with labor when there are strikes, in whatever sector we're talking about. However, in a situation where there's always mistrust between the ministry and labor unions, so someone else has to intervene, and I think that's what happened. And in this instance, at the end of the day, the strike was called up. But as you also said, have all the issues been, adequately addressed?
Just for the optics.
Yes. Well, I mean, the 800 workers, which was one of their problems, have been recalled. They have been deployed, that they will be deployed to other, departments
and
in
even
the
to
Dangote
pay compensation for severance benefits.
Yes, in the Dangote group of companies. So let's hope that that has put a lead on that. We'll be moving on to Vanguard newspaper this morning. The $92 billion lithium rush leaves Nigerian investors behind. Muda Yusuf, foreign investors should not own mines 100%. Nasarawa leading in lithium mining-friendly policies. According to this report, no Nigerian investor is known to be a significant player in this sector, except artisanal miners. Chinese investors are said to have taken the lead. There's Avatar and Gafeng Chinese companies that have invested heavily. The bulk of extraction are shipped to electric vehicle battery manufacturers in Shenzhen, Guangdong in China. There's also Tamil Nadu in India, Seoul in South Korea, Osaka in Japan, and other industrial centers in Southeast Asia. Experts contend Nigeria can only benefit if the government implements the solid minerals value chain regulations and local investors move in to the sector. A lot more details in this report when you pick up a copy, but the point to be made here is that the country will be put on a back foot, as in the past, if things are not done differently. And the second point is that while green energy is often promoted as an environmentally friendly alternative, its exploitation can also cause significant ecological harm if not properly regulated, isn't it, Benga?
Yeah, it's good that we are talking about these issues that concerns biosafety, especially at a day like this when the world is marking its International Habitat Day. And the issue is also an urban crisis, addressing the conflicts and the challenges of the energy future for to have a resilient climate, especially in a country like Africa, where most of the deals we seem to have to be at the receiving end. But be that when you consider the fact that lithium has shown the way forward in terms of energy renewal, most of the batteries are shifting from cellular cells to lithium batteries now, and many other investment shows a very huge potential. Niger State is also claiming that it has a very huge
potential and also problem. Yes, yeah. Potential.
Yeah,
yes,
it's a threat.
Depends on how it's managed, right? You know, like this report already said, we're not even players in that sector, which has a huge potential to be a revenue earner for the country. At the same time, the ecological devastation for our country is also something we have to look at. And the third leg, actually, when you look at some countries like Mali, Chad, Sudan, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, northern Nigeria, what do they have in common? Insecurity.
Absolutely.
High levels of insecurity. It means that exploitation, resource exploitation is fueling insecurity. So, you know, there's so many, dimensions and levels to this. I
share your sentiment, actually, and the government really needs to. But it's also a welcome development, and it took China 40 years from that brilliant report that we saw. It took China 40 years to get to where they are today. The fact that we have changed our laws, initially issues of solid minerals and mining were on the exclusive list, but they're now on the concurrent list. So it shows that the Nigerian government is now taking deliberate steps to address its solid minerals roadmap. Right. And I think that if there is more consistency in that area, it will open up avenues for investment.
All right, Leadership newspaper. Alleged certificate forgery pressure mounts on Science Minister Nnaji to resign. How court turned down minister's request to stop release of academic records. Allegations add that the certificates submitted by the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Uche Nnaji, are forged. He had sought a court injunction to stop his academic records from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, from being released. Other papers are now reporting that he has acknowledged that UNN did not issue him any certificate. So where did he get one from? Critics say he did not complete his university education. Scandal, Wenga. And, when I read the story, what came to mind is that there's so much focus on paper qualification because we think that it equals competence and success. But that's often not the case. And the barrier for entry into politics in Nigeria is quite low. So you don't even need to be forging a certificate. Although, he needs to really come clean on this.
He needs to really come clean on this. First and foremost, when I heard that, I had to renew my check, my fact-checking on what the Constitution really demands for to be a minister. And it's so clear that it's a secondary school living certificate to be a minister according to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But be that as it may, the issue is now borders on the integrity of the person in government as a leader that holds such a strategic position as a minister of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We'll need to be very careful because institutions, we know how sometimes difficult when you finish there and to get your transcript and many other things, you almost pass through the eye of a needle. A lot of people are carrying their notification of results about.
But that's different though.
Yeah.
If your notification of result is genuine, then you can present it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the issue here is forgery.
Absolutely. And I also question why he would be filing an ex parte motion to prevent the university from releasing a copy of evidence of his participation in the school.
If he has nothing to hide.
If he has nothing to hide.
Yes.
So he really should come out clean. But I also understand that the case is, he will be heard today. So we also need to exercise a bit of restraint and caution so not to be held on the issue of subsidies.
One more thing. So we're hearing that during the elections, the governorship elections in 2023, he was one of those that brought an issue of certificate forgery against the current governor of Enugu State, Dr. Peter Mba. So you can imagine that, he has quite a bit of enemies, so we'll see how that plays out. That's by the way. All right, let's move to another paper. Daily Independent this morning, excuse me. Experts see September inflation at 18.46% on back of falling food costs. Project further monetary easing at CBN November MPC meeting. The inflation dipped to 18.46% was from 20.12% owing to Naira appreciation, stable fuel price and falling food costs. The government target is 15%, and experts warn the road to this will not be smooth. Marginal fall of inflation, Benga here. However, there's not much to celebrate because we're still doing crippling double digits, which is hard on households. A quick look at inflation rates around Africa. South Africa, they have, that's the second biggest economy or biggest economy depending on what time of the year you're looking at. The inflation holds steady at 3% mark. Kenya 5.5 to 5.6%, Botswana 1.4%, Senegal 2.2%. Nigeria is struggling, isn't it?
Yeah, economists have often maintained that the best way to determine a country's growth is through its GDP. So, and we saw the president boasting on the Independence Day that against even the World Bank prediction that Nigeria cannot grow beyond 3%, that it has recorded a 4.2% GDP. That's welcome, but the fact is that some other economists have also insisted that the main theater of the inflation crisis is the area of food security. So it needs an urgent intervention by the federal government to ensure that they bring food inflation low, and that is what connects a lot of Nigerians. Other items could rise and without having that kind of spiral and deep effect in the nation's economy. But when it comes to food inflation, so with a lot of investments still be spent on food importation, it will definitely affect the nation's food inflation rate. So I think we need to drive all the resources toward food efficiency. So once we break that part, we can also look at our trade and investment policy and also industrial policy, just like the report that you captured from China, how China had taken deliberate steps to maintain its economic growth through its industrial policy. So I think that those are the areas that the government needs to look at. Now, we all admit that it's managing a fragile economy.
And since you have mentioned China, one of the things that you would notice or observe in that country is the level of discipline.
Absolutely.
Without discipline, it is impossible to go far to achieve anything. Being reckless, having a reckless, attitude towards the government. And last week I asked, do we have a revenue problem or do we have an expenditure problem? Yes, we have revenue shortfalls, but we also have an expenditure problem. We're not managing our resources as best as we could. Let's move on to New Telegraph. Wike leads reconciliation meeting for Fubara, Amewule, others. Fate of governor's chief of staff uncertain. If we go to the Punch newspaper, please let's pull that up. It's been reported that Fubara's men were absent at that reunion or meeting called by the minister. The New Telegraph article did report that Governor Sim Fubara met last week with the minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, and political leaders loyal to the minister. Wike called the meeting in Port Harcourt with the aim of ending political divisions in the state. There were efforts made to reconcile Fubara and the Speaker, Honorable Martin Samewule. Both men do not see eye to eye, especially because Fubara cannot function without a state assembly, and the one that is there is not loyal to him. So you can imagine what a position. He is in a tight corner. Even after the state of emergency was lifted, he still has a state of assembly that he has no control over.
Yeah.
Maybe control is not the word, because in essence he shouldn't be controlling. However, you should have a kind of cordial relationship, considerable influence in the state of assembly to be able to do anything as governor.
Absolutely. Prior to his resumption, we said that definitely all indices shows that this is a governor that has been thoroughly subdued. He's been humble to accept that option's choice of being a governor. That's a very, very compromised state of affair. And that, just like our lessons from Gaddafi, the old Libya, you don't tamper with the politics. You don't place it on a trial and error, and you think that you can easily correct it. So Rivers State is just waking up from a state of from an affair that looks like a state capture. So you can't expect everything to be to just come back as if nothing ever happened. It will take a while, because now the indication is that if Wike truly called for a meeting and we have an assembly that is perceived to be loyal to Wike, and now they are absenting themselves from that meeting, it questions the credibility of that peace process.
Yes, I mean, it's not over for Governor Sim Fubara. Quite a position to be in. Let's move on to Daily Trust. They plot to remove Rev's minority leader Thickens. Fresh crisis brewing in the House of Representatives as attempts are being made to dethrone House Minority Leader Kingsley Chinda. The House is expected to resume from recess today. It's all about power tussle between the various parties, the PDP, Labour Party, SDP, you have ABGA, YPP. If Adesua was here, she covers the House. Yeah. She would have given us more on that, or shared more that she knows from that story. But they've been on recess, they're now resuming, and they're heading into a storm.
Yeah, I think what has played out is the allegation of over poor leadership and compromise, and his perceived, Honorable Kingsley Chinda's perceived allegiance to Nyesom Wike. And they think that will compromise, because of Wike's also spiral allegiance to the APC, the ruling party. So that would compromise the opposition stance at the House. So that's just basically what's playing out. And also, the convention of the PDP is coming up, and with Wike having such a strong ally in person of Kingsley Chinda, that would have a lot of effect, political advantage for Wike going ahead.
Let's move to the international headlines. Daily Graphic: Mahama renews war on Galamsey. Galamsey refers to illegal mining in Ghana. The Citizen newspaper: Will Mashaba run in Josie? Action essays: Herman Mashaba is running toe-to-toe with the DA's Helen Zille for mayor of Joburg. Iron newspaper: Tax rates continue in the UK. Reeves looks at budget tax hike on bank profits to raise billions. So she's done with the individuals, she's going to the banks. The Times newspaper: Trump warns Hamas of obliteration as negotiators fly to Egypt. That's a harsh word. I mean, does Hamas have any choice here with this threat from President Trump? And finally, the Independent newspaper: Badenoch told she has death wish for the Conservative Party, while she has announced she would ditch the European Convention on Human Rights and deport 150,000 a year, causing former Attorney General Dominic Grieve to warn it will mean the demise of the party. Badenoch toying the populist path here, isn't she?
Well, I'm not even sure that she's what I would call that populist part, other than being a bit absurd and a bit and somehow absurdity is what I would call it, because if she's planning to deport 150,000
a year,
thousand a year,
yes,
and most of even the party members too belong to that are foreigners, so like her. So, if whatever structure that would be deporting those 150,000 should also catch up with her.
Well, the thing is, because immigration is such a hot topic in the UK
Yes.
and across Europe in general, I think for every politician or for the Conservative Party now that are struggling to come back into power, we have the other party, Nigel Farage's party, doing very well. You know, so Conservatives have to compete not with only Labour, but Nigel Farage's party, that's Reform UK. So the point here is that this is a hot topic that they can jump on, you know, in order to win the hearts of voters. So voters want immigration to decline in the UK. They are seeing the boats, you know, coming across France, and it seems like even with the negotiation they had with France, and whatever document they signed, it seems like the boats haven't stopped. So everyone wants to see that the Labour Party is doing something about that, and they feel that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, is not doing enough. So based on that, Conservative Party, Badenoch, thinks that it is a good point to raise, that we will deport people from this country. So vote for us, we will do better on immigration. I don't know if she'll be able to do that, actually. 150,000.
I think
it's easier said than done.
I think you said something that the migrant issue is a big issue when it comes to electioneering and politics in the West. But I think that she cannot take the risk to copy wholesale what Trump did in the US and trying to adopt it wholesale in UK. It will definitely have a spiral effect, boomerang effect, actually.
All right, that's all we can take on the paper review this morning, Gbenga.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Constance. It's been so exciting and refreshing, actually.